What I'd like to maybe just start with is just the evolution of work, and I think we have a couple of slides that we're gonna pop up. Um, so this is just a slide that I want to use to sort of provide a bit of a retrospective on how we've and perspective on how we've gotten here. So if you think of much of the constructs of how many of us work today, that's about 130 or 140 years old, and you can see under the banner of the second industrial revolution some of the factors that characterize the way we work, this traditional one-to-one relationship between job holders and jobs, one size fits most approaches to talent engagement, and technology really built to kind of support this notion of people and jobs. You fast forward to the third industrial revolution, and essentially what the first sort of crack, if you will, in this model was the democratization of information. As we started to see semi-open ecosystems, because I could now look beyond the walls of my company and understand the costs, capabilities, and risks of work being done elsewhere. We started to see this notion, this thing called the organization, shift from merely being the place that people came to do work between 9 to 5 to also becoming the place that was the nexus for contracts as we lifted and shifted jobs. Again, jobs still being the currency of work. You fast forward to the fourth industrial revolution, which in many respects is where we sit today. And we now overlay against the democratization of information, the democratization of work. Given the proliferation of new technologies, the notion of companies as platforms and open ecosystems, and there's the expanding notion of jobs and gigs. And then the next click, if you will, is where we continue on that journey towards a much more human enterprise as we move away from traditionally thinking of humans as plugging into an overarching machinery and process, if you will, to increasingly an environment where skills are truly the currency of work, and where we start to move to that many to many relationships between work and skills. Hari, we touched on a second ago the notion of agile and agile operating systems, where instead of talent being bound up in jobs, what you have is increasingly on the basis of the many to many relationship, talent flowing to work as seamlessly as possible. That's one of the reasons why, as many of us on this call know, the internal marketplaces have become such a hot issue for so many organizations, because they really start to liberate talent from those traditional confines and increase the productivity of the enterprise. We start to see, Hari, something you and I have talked about a lot, automation really start to become a work partner to talent. And with that movement to many, we can extend that to learning as well, because instead of having a degree matched to a person and matched to a position, what you now have are multiple nano and micro upskilling and reskilling opportunities, which are so required given the pace of change and the shrinking half-life of skills, matched to that unique bundle of skills that is Greg versus Hari, matched to many different ways in which each of us can express our skills in the work that we do. So that much more seamless connection between learning and work, and increasingly, as we're seeing and as we discuss in the book, where learning is designed and into the flow of work. And all of that sort of driving to that much more human-centric work experience, and enabled with distributed autonomous organizations and crypto increasingly, as we look at how work evolves into Web 3.0. So I'm hoping that that sort of story is sort of helpful in giving a sense of how we've kind of gotten here, and how John and I have been thinking about this continued evolution of work. And I think if we, on this next slide, we start to lay out some of the principles of the new work operating system that I've sort of alluded to, which are really focused on driving a much higher degree of organizational agility, so that we've got organizations that can rapidly respond to, goodness, we all know, right, how quickly we've had to respond to the changing nature of everything for the last 2 years. But how do we respond and have the capacity for change, the capacity for adaptation? And the four principles that really govern the ideas in the book are what you see on this slide. So starting with the work, the current and future work and tasks of the organization, and not just the existing jobs of the enterprise. So transcending that legacy of jobs, um, setting out to achieve the optimal combinations of humans and automation. And this was really something that we explored in Reinventing Jobs, understanding the nuances of how automation comes in and simultaneously substitute, augments, and transforms human work. Um, when we think of that human work, considering the full array of human work engagements, whether it's that employee in a full-time role, whether it's an employee who is flowing to work much more seamlessly, moving from one project to another, that gig worker, and including internal gigs, freelancers, alliances, and various other alternative arrangements, like even volunteers, as we're seeing with some organizations. But what is that quantum of ways in which human talent can connect with work? So we're not limiting those relationships. And then lastly, ensuring that we're increasing the agility with which talent is connected to work, allowing talent to flow to work more seamlessly, and having a plurality of means for connecting with work, as opposed to merely being limited to a fixed and traditional job. Now, underpinning these four principles are kind of the seven elements of the new work operating system. So I know I'm sort of it's a bit like drinking from the fire hose here, but we wanted to give you just a quick sneak preview into some of the ideas in the book. So if we jump to the next slide. So those four principles really start to lay out seven key elements of that new work operating system. So the first is this notion of work as deconstructed job elements. And we really view deconstruction as being such a pivotal capability for leaders in HR. So starting with the fundamental units of work, tasks, and activities, um, asking the question from an automation perspective, what are the characteristics of those tasks and what is the return on improved performance? So we can, in fact, understand the nuances through which automation plays out. Is it a substitution play versus an augmentation play versus actually creating demand for new human work? Thinking about work arrangements, as I said a second ago, as a boundaryless and democratized work ecosystem. So thinking of all of those different relationships. And perhaps most important and kind of central to the ideas in the book are this notion of thinking of our talent as whole individuals with an array of deconstructed capabilities and skills. I think this is really at the heart of moving to a much more human enterprise, when we transcend that one-to-one relationship between a degree, a person, and a position, to the many-to-many between skills and work. The equally important, I think, is the capacity for perpetual reinvention within organizations. It's in so much of how work has evolved, it's been very much a kind of a one and done, and having the capacity to perpetually reinvent task and project level combinations is increasingly so essential as we build the adaptive enterprise. Um, the fifth dimension starts to get into what does this now mean for leadership and management. And a shout out to John Boudreau and Jonathan Donner, who wrote a great piece in the Sloan Management Review about what it means to actually lead in a world in a world without jobs, what it means when teams are simultaneously forming and disbanding, where algorithms are really at the heart of supervision and coordination. And then the last dimension is where we explore, beyond the organization, what does this now mean for social values and policies, both at the country level as well as at a more macro level, and the changing social compact between labor and organizations and society at large, and what that means for this alignment for providing worker sustainability, worker voice, equity, and inclusion. My colleagues at Mercer are just wrapping up a really interesting project that I'd encourage you all to look at with the World Economic Forum, where we are working together to come up with some new standards for work as to what inclusive and equitable work looks like, and that'll be published in the next couple of months.